Sometimes, love doesn't arrive in thunder or lightning. Sometimes it comes softly, like sunlight finding its way through the cracks of a heavy curtain. And that's exactly how it came into the life of Eduard, a man who had everything that success could offer except the one thing he truly needed. Eduard was the kind of man people admired from afar. Young, confident, impossibly composed. His company had just broken records in profits. His name was whispered in business magazines, and his face often appeared in articles about self-made CEOs. But behind the tailored suits and the calm smile, he carried a silence, one that came home with him every night, sitting quietly beside him at dinner, echoing through the empty halls of his mansion. That silence had a name. Leah. She was 6 years old, small, gentle, with eyes that shimmered like glass beads reflecting the world but never fully letting it in. Leah was on the autism spectrum, and though she rarely spoke, her presence filled every room she entered. Eduard loved her more than anything in the world. But love, he had learned, wasn't always enough to reach someone locked inside their own quiet universe. He tried, to understand her silence, her fascination with colors and music, her fear of sudden noise. But between meetings, flights, and endless calls, Eduard always felt like he was running out of time, like the clock was moving faster than his heart could keep up. That was when Anna entered their lives. She arrived on a soft spring morning, carrying nothing but a small suitcase, a warm smile, and a recommendation letter. She was young, not much older than 25, with brown hair tied neatly in a braid and eyes that had seen struggle but had never lost their light. When Eduard opened the door that morning, his first thought wasn't about her appearance. It was about her calm. She stood there, steady and polite, even as the grand marble hallway and gold-trimmed staircase loomed behind him. Most people who entered his house felt intimidated. Anna didn't. She simply looked around with quiet awe and said, "It's beautiful. You'll be helping with the household chores," Eduard said. His tone as professional as if he were conducting a job interview at his company. "And my daughter, she's 6. She doesn't talk much." Anna smiled softly. "That's okay. Children don't always need words." Those words, simple yet full of something he couldn't name, stayed with him for the rest of the day. When she met Leah, something extraordinary happened. The little girl, who usually hid behind her toys or her drawings, stared at Anna for a long moment. Then, without a word, she reached out and touched her hand. It was small, barely noticeable, but to Eduard it felt like a miracle. Anna crouched beside her and smiled. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm Anna. I'll be here to help your daddy take care of you." Leah blinked, tilting her head curiously, as if studying her new presence. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't retreat. She stayed. Days turned into weeks, and Anna became an invisible rhythm in their lives. She woke up early, made breakfast, helped Leah get dressed, and always found time to hum little tunes while working. Tunes that somehow made the house feel warmer. Eduard found himself noticing her more than he intended. The way she gently coaxed Leah to eat her meals, how she danced playfully with a mop while cleaning the floor, how her laughter seemed to echo softly even in the largest rooms of his mansion. But he also noticed something else. She never treated him like a CEO. She spoke to him like a person, sometimes even teasingly, which caught him off guard. "Mr. Gray," she said one morning, while arranging flowers in the dining room, "you work too much. You should learn from your daughter. She knows how to enjoy the sunlight." He raised a brow, half amused. "That's how I afford sunlight for both of us." She smiled but didn't reply. Instead, she turned back to the vase, her reflection shimmering faintly in the glass. Then came the night of the celebration. Eduard's company had achieved a major milestone, the biggest contract in its history. To mark the occasion, he hosted a grand party at his house. The mansion came alive with music, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Men in suits, women in glittering dresses, the air full of perfume and expensive conversation. Leah, dressed in a simple pale blue dress, stood quietly near the staircase. The sound and light overwhelmed her, but she didn't want to leave. She loved music. It always reached her in ways words couldn't. From across the room, Anna watched her with concern. She could see the way Leah's hands fidgeted, how her eyes darted around nervously. Then the band began to play, a soft, cheerful tune. Leah took a hesitant step forward. She looked at the people dancing, laughing, but when she reached out, no one noticed her. They smiled politely, too absorbed in their own conversations. And that was when Anna did something that made the whole room pause. She walked straight to Leah, knelt down and whispered, "Do you want to dance?" Leah looked up, her eyes wide. Slowly, she nodded. Anna smiled and took her small hands, guiding her gently to the rhythm of the music. It wasn't perfect. Leah's movements were clumsy, hesitant, but Anna followed her lead, matching her energy, her steps. And within moments, Leah began to smile. It was a small, radiant smile that lit up her entire face. From across the room, Eduard saw it. And for the first time in years, he felt his throat tighten. All the noise around him faded. All he could see was his daughter laughing, as she spun in the arms of the young woman who had somehow unlocked her world. The guests watched, some with polite smiles, others with genuine warmth. But Eduard couldn't move. He couldn't look away. In that single moment, he saw something that success had never given him, something money could never buy. He saw love, not romantic love yet, but something pure, something healing. After the song ended, Leah hugged Anna tightly, her tiny arms wrapping around her waist. Eduard approached, his eyes still soft from the sight. "That was—" He paused, searching for words. "Beautiful." Anna smiled shyly. "She's special. She just needed someone to listen." He nodded, his heart strangely heavy yet full. "You have no idea how much that meant to me." Anna glanced at him, and in that brief, wordless exchange, something passed between them. Something quiet, unspoken, and deeply human. That night, long after the guests had left, Eduard stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. He could still hear Leah's laughter echoing faintly in his mind. And when he thought of Anna, of her warmth, her patience, her unguarded kindness, he realized that, for the first time in a long while, his house didn't feel so empty anymore. He didn't know it yet, but that night wasn't the end of the celebration. It was only the beginning of something neither of them had planned for, yet both desperately needed. Something that would change all three of their lives forever. Morning came softly to the gray mansion. The golden sunlight slipped through the tall windows, touching the edges of polished furniture, gliding over the marble floor, and settling gently on the face of a sleeping little girl. She was curled up in her bed, her favorite plush rabbit in her arms, the faintest smile resting on her lips. Downstairs, Anna was already awake. She moved quietly, careful not to make a sound that might startle the stillness of the house. There was something sacred about those early hours, before the calls began, before the hum of responsibility filled the air again. She brewed coffee, the scent filling the kitchen like warmth after a long night. For her, mornings had always been moments of hope, reminders that every day could be better than the one before. She hummed softly as she set the table, unaware that someone was watching her from the doorway. Eduard stood there, wearing a loose shirt and dark pants, holding a mug he hadn't yet filled. His usually sharp expression was softened by sleep, his hair slightly tousled, the image of a man unmasked from his daily armor. "Good morning," Anna said, looking up and smiling. He blinked, almost startled by the sound of her voice. "Good morning. You're up early." "I always am," she said. "Old habit. The house feels peaceful at this hour." He nodded, stepping in to pour himself coffee. "Peaceful isn't a word I'd normally use for this house." Anna tilted her head. "Maybe you just forgot what peace sounds like." Her tone wasn't teasing. It was gentle, almost wistful, and it made him pause. He looked at her for a moment, as if seeing her differently. The way her hair caught the morning light, the calm in her eyes, the natural ease with which she moved through the space, as though she belonged there, though she never tried to. "Leah slept well last night," Anna added, breaking the silence. She was still smiling when she went to bed. Eduard's lips curved faintly. "That's rare. Then maybe last night was special." Anna said softly. She needed that joy. He stared at his coffee for a long time. So did I. Their eyes met, just briefly, and in that look, quiet and fleeting, there was something neither of them dared to name. As days passed, something inside the house began to shift. The halls that once echoed with emptiness now carried laughter. The music of Leah's small footsteps, her humming, the faint melody of Anna's singing, all weaving together like threads of light. Anna didn't just clean or cook. She noticed. She saw the tiny things that others ignored. The way Leah liked her pancakes cut in stars, how she lined her crayons by color, how certain sounds made her cover her ears. She adjusted to all of it, patiently, tenderly. One evening, after work, Eduard came home to find them in the backyard. Leah was sitting in the grass, drawing with chalk on the pavement. Anna was beside her, her hands stained with pink and blue dust, laughing as Leah tried to draw a sun with too many rays. He stopped in the doorway, his briefcase still in hand. He hadn't seen Leah laugh like that in. He couldn't remember how long. For years, his life had been schedules, meetings, deadlines, and guilt. The guilt of being a father who provided everything except the one thing his daughter truly needed, time. But now, standing there watching them, he realized that time was exactly what Anna had given both of them. That night, after putting Leah to bed, he found Anna still in the kitchen, wiping the counter. "You do more than I asked for," he said quietly. She looked up, surprised. "I just do what feels right. You've done more for Leah in a few weeks than I have in years." His voice was low, almost breaking. She's happier. I don't even know how to thank you." Anna set the cloth down and stepped closer. "You love her. That's what matters. Children feel that, even when we don't have the words." Eduard looked at her, his expression softening. "You talk about love like it's simple." "Maybe it is," she said with a small smile. "We just make it complicated." Her simplicity disarmed him. No one spoke to him that way, not in the world he came from, where everything was strategy and control. But Anna had a way of undoing his armor without even trying. For a moment, they stood there in silence, only the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the space. Then Leah's voice called faintly from upstairs. "Anna!" She turned, smiling. "I'm coming, sweetheart." Eduard watched her go, her steps light and sure, and in that quiet second after she left, he realized how much emptier the room felt without her in it. The next few days unfolded like a slow melody. Eduard began coming home earlier. He'd find them baking cookies, painting, or simply sitting by the piano while Anna played a soft tune. Leah had started humming along, small sounds, tentative but music nonetheless. One evening, as Anna helped Leah with her bedtime routine, Eduard stood by the doorway again, quietly observing. "Do you think the stars can hear us?" Leah asked suddenly, her small voice clear and curious. Anna smiled. "I think they can. They just don't always answer right away." Eduard's breath caught. It wasn't just the words, it was the fact that Leah had spoken a full sentence. After she fell asleep, he approached Anna. "She spoke," he said in disbelief. "She actually spoke." Anna nodded, her eyes shimmering. "She's been trying for days. She needed to feel safe enough to try." He swallowed hard, emotions tightening in his chest. "You've given her something I didn't know how to give." Anna looked at him softly. "Maybe you were both waiting for someone to remind you how." That night, when Eduard lay in bed, sleep didn't come easily. He thought about her, her kindness, her patience, the way she brought color back into a world that had gone gray. He didn't want to feel this way. He told himself she was just his employee, that his feelings were gratitude, nothing more. But every time she smiled, that illusion shattered. And in the quiet of his room, he realized something that terrified him. He was falling in love with her. Not with her beauty, though she was undeniably beautiful, but with the light she carried, the kind that didn't blind but healed. He had built his life around logic, control, and reason. But love was something else. It was messy, unpredictable, human. And for the first time in years, Eduard Gray, the man who had everything, was scared. Because this wasn't a deal he could negotiate. It wasn't a dream he could buy. It was something fragile, something real, something he could lose. And yet, every time Anna smiled, he couldn't help but hope that maybe, just maybe, love had found him anyway. Days turned into weeks, and the gray mansion began to feel alive again. What had once been a place of cold walls and distant echoes now carried the warmth of laughter, music, and life. Eduard often found himself pausing in the middle of his work just to listen, to the faint hum of Leah's voice upstairs or Anna's laughter drifting through the hallways. He didn't understand how this woman, this gentle, ordinary woman, had done what no doctor, no therapist, no specialist ever could. She had brought his daughter back to him. But she had done something else, too. Something even more dangerous. She had awakened him. It began subtly. He would think about her at the office, the sound of her voice, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way she always knelt down to speak to Leah at eye level, never towering over her. One evening, he arrived home earlier than usual. Anna and Leah were sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by crayons and construction paper. They didn't notice him at first. Leah was giggling as Anna traced her hand on the paper. "There," Anna said with a grin. "Now we'll make a flower out of it." Leah clapped her hands, her smile brighter than the chandelier above them. Eduard's heart tightened. He couldn't remember the last time his home had felt this alive. When Anna finally noticed him, she blushed slightly and stood up. "Oh, you're home early, Mr. Gray." He smiled faintly. "Eduard, I told you. Call me Eduard." She hesitated. "It just feels strange." "Then I'll keep reminding you," he said, his tone warm but teasing. There was a silence between them, a charged stillness that neither of them seemed to know what to do with. Then Leah tugged at Anna's sleeve, breaking the moment. "Anna, show him my flower." Anna smiled down at her. "Of course, sweetheart." She held up the paper for him to see. Eduard knelt beside his daughter. "That's beautiful, Leah. Did you do this all by yourself?" Leah shook her head and pointed to Anna. "Anna helped." He looked up at her and she smiled, a small, shy smile that reached her eyes. That night, Eduard stayed longer in the living room after Leah went to bed. Anna was tidying up, gathering crayons and papers. "You don't have to do all that," he said. She glanced over her shoulder. "I like things to be in order before the morning." He watched her for a long moment. "You know, I used to think happiness was about success, about how much you could build or own or prove. And now?" she asked quietly. He took a slow breath. "Now I think it's about moments like this." Anna froze for a moment, her heart beating faster. She turned to face him. "You've had a lot of those moments lately." He smiled softly. "Thanks to you." Their eyes met, and something in the air changed. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was something deeper, something unspoken but undeniably real. But before either could say another word, a sharp knock sounded at the front door. Eduard frowned. "It's late." He walked over and opened it to find a woman standing there. Tall, elegant, dressed in a designer coat. Her eyes swept through the space with practiced ease, until they landed on Anna. "Eduard," she said coolly, "you didn't tell me you hired help." Anna lowered her gaze instantly, feeling out of place. Eduard's expression darkened slightly. "Clara, what are you doing here?" Clara smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I was in the area. I thought I'd visit Leah." Anna stepped back silently as the woman entered, her perfume heavy in the air. Clara, Leah's mother. She hadn't seen her daughter in nearly a year. Leah came running from the stairs, her small footsteps echoing across the floor. When she saw her mother, she stopped, uncertain. Clara crouched down, arms open. "Sweetheart." Leah didn't move. She just stared, confused and hesitant. Anna's heart broke at the sight. She wanted to comfort her, but she didn't dare. Clara's smile faltered when Leah didn't run into her arms. She looked up at Eduard, her voice cold. "You've let her forget me." Eduard's jaw tightened. "You walked away, Clara. And now she's attached to the help?" she snapped, her glare shifting to Anna. "How convenient." Anna felt her chest tighten, but she said nothing. She only lowered her eyes and excused herself quietly. Later that night, Eduard found her in the kitchen, wiping down the counter with trembling hands. "I'm sorry," he said softly. She shook her head. "It's not your fault. She had no right to talk to you like that." "I'm used to people like her," Anna whispered. "People who look at me and only see what they expect." He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "You deserve to be seen for who you are, Anna, not for what anyone assumes." She looked up at him then, really looked. His eyes were soft, his expression raw, and something in her broke. Because for the first time in her life, someone had said those words, "You deserve to be seen." Her lips parted to speak, but no words came. The silence between them was heavy, intimate. He wanted to touch her, to brush away the tear that had slipped down her cheek, but he stopped himself. Instead, he said quietly, "She doesn't matter. What matters is Leah. And you've changed everything here, Anna." She turned away, afraid of what her heart was doing inside her chest. After that night, things were different. Not worse, just heavier. Eduard found excuses to spend more time at home. He told himself it was for Leah, but he knew the truth. And Anna, she found herself dreaming about him, despite knowing how impossible it was. But one afternoon, while she was helping Leah in the garden, she saw Clara again, standing by the gate watching. Clara smiled, cold and sharp. "You think you belong here, don't you?" Anna froze. "You're a pretty distraction, that's all." Eduard always had a weakness for projects. Anna's throat tightened. "You don't know him." "Oh, I do," Clara said smoothly. "And I know how this ends. Don't get comfortable." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Anna shaken. That night, as she sat on her small bed in her room, tears fell silently. She told herself she wouldn't cry. She told herself she didn't care. But her heart hurt, not just because of Clara's words, but because part of her feared they were true. Could a man like Eduard ever really love someone like her? She fell asleep before she could answer that question. Meanwhile, Eduard sat alone in his study, staring at the photo of Leah and Anna that had been drawn in chalk that first week. And he realized something with absolute certainty. He couldn't go back. He couldn't imagine his home or his life without Anna in it. But the question that haunted him was whether she felt the same. Because love, he was learning, wasn't about what you said. It was about what you dared to believe, even when everything around you tried to tell you it was impossible. The next morning came with the soft sound of rain tapping against the tall windows of the gray mansion. It was the kind of rain that quieted the world, gentle but relentless, wrapping the house in a somber calm. Eduard stood by the window of his office, watching the drizzle run down the glass, while the weight of the previous night pressed heavily on his chest. Clara's sudden return had unsettled everything. He had spent half the night awake, haunted by the look in Anna's eyes when Clara humiliated her. He hated himself for letting it happen. Downstairs, Anna was making breakfast, her movements slower than usual. Leah sat at the kitchen table, humming softly as she colored. When Eduard entered, Anna straightened immediately, forcing a polite smile. "Good morning, Mr. Gray," she said softly. Eduard paused, frowning slightly. "You haven't called me that in weeks." Her smile faltered. "It just feels right today." He wanted to tell her to stop, to call him Eduard again, to look at him the way she used to. But something inside him told him to stay quiet. She was building her walls again, and he didn't want to push too hard. As breakfast went on, Leah chattered about her drawings and how she wanted to show Anna something new she'd learned. The sight of the two of them together warmed him, but beneath the warmth there was fear, the fear that this fragile piece could collapse at any moment. When Anna went to the garden to hang laundry later, Eduard followed her outside. The air smelled of wet earth and grass. She didn't notice him at first, her focus on pinning the sheets to the line, her fingers trembling slightly in the breeze. "You shouldn't be out here in the rain," he said gently. She jumped at the sound of his voice. "Oh, I didn't hear you." "Anna," he said, stepping closer. "About last night." She shook her head quickly. "Please don't. You don't have to apologize for her." "I'm not apologizing for her." I'm apologizing for me, for not stopping it sooner. Her eyes lifted to his, uncertain. She had no right to speak to you that way, he continued. You've been nothing but kind, patient, and... He hesitated, searching for the right word. Extraordinary. Her throat tightened. You shouldn't say things like that, Mr. Gray. Why not? He asked softly. Because it makes it harder. For what? For me to remember my place, she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. He was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the rain falling on the leaves. Finally, he said, You don't have a place, Anna. You have a purpose. And that purpose isn't beneath anyone. Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she turned away, biting her lip to keep them from falling. Before either of them could speak again, Leah came running through the garden, waving a piece of paper. Daddy! Anna! Look what I made! Eduard crouched as Leah handed him the paper. A crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. He smiled softly. Who's this? That's you, Leah said proudly, pointing to the tall figure. That's me. And that's Anna. Eduard's heart tightened. Anna's hand rose instinctively to her mouth. Leah continued, We're a family. Eduard's gaze met Anna's. For a moment, neither of them could breathe. Later that evening, Eduard sat in his study, unable to focus on anything. The house was quiet, too quiet. He opened the drawer of his desk and took out the drawing Leah had made. He ran his thumb across the paper, feeling something stir inside him that he hadn't felt in years. The ache of hope. He was still staring at it when his phone buzzed. It was a message from Clara. We need to talk. About Leah. It's important. He sighed deeply. When he met Clara the next day, she was waiting at a cafe downtown. Sunglasses perched on her head, her posture sharp and composed. I'll get straight to the point, she said. I want Leah to come live with me for a while. Eduard froze. You what? You've kept her long enough. I'm her mother. I have a right. You left her, Clara. Her voice hardened. And I regret that. But you're letting her get too close to that woman. Eduard's jaw tightened. Anna is good for her. She's the help, Eduard. Be serious. Watch your words, he warned quietly. Clara leaned back in her chair, smirking. You're not thinking clearly. You're projecting your loneliness onto her. It's pathetic. He stood abruptly, his voice low but firm. Don't ever speak about her again. That night, Eduard returned home later than usual. Anna was in the kitchen cleaning up, humming softly to herself. Leah had already gone to bed. You're home late, Anna said without turning around. He didn't answer immediately. He just watched her. The way her hair fell loosely over her shoulder, the way her movements were slow but graceful. I had to meet someone, he said finally. Clara. Anna froze. Oh, she wants to take Leah. Anna turned to face him, her eyes wide. What? She can't. She doesn't even know her anymore. I know, he said, rubbing a hand over his face. But she's determined. She'll use the courts if she has to. Tears welled in Anna's eyes. Leah would be devastated. I won't let it happen, Eduard said firmly. Not again. Silence fell between them, heavy, uncertain. Anna, he said softly, stepping closer. I need you to know something. What you've done for Leah. What you've done for me. Her heart was pounding so loudly she thought he could hear it. He hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper. You've become part of this family, and I don't ever want to lose that. She looked at him, trembling. Eduard. He moved closer still, close enough to feel her breath. But before he could say anything more, they heard Leah's small voice from the doorway. Daddy. They turned. Leah stood there, rubbing her eyes. I had a bad dream. Eduard smiled gently and scooped her up in his arms. It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here. Anna watched them, her chest tight. It was a beautiful moment, but it also reminded her of where she stood. As Eduard carried Leah upstairs, Anna whispered to herself, Don't fall for something you can't have. But the truth was, it was already too late. Her heart had chosen, even if her mind hadn't allowed her to admit it yet. And upstairs, As Eduard laid Leah in her bed, he realized something too. He wasn't just fighting Clara anymore. He was fighting fate itself, to keep the only two people who had truly made him feel alive. As the weeks went by, Eduard found himself looking forward to coming home more than ever before. There was a light in that house now, laughter, warmth, and something he hadn't realized he'd been missing: peace. Every evening when he walked through the front door, he'd hear Leah's giggles echoing through the hallway. Sometimes it was because Anna was helping her bake cookies, sometimes because they were building castles out of pillows, and sometimes because they were simply dancing again, just like that night of the party. But for Eduard, it wasn't just about the laughter. It was about how Anna brought life into the home, into his heart, and even into Leah's world. Leah had started speaking more words, looking people in the eye, and smiling in ways she hadn't before. And every time she did, Eduard silently thanked Anna. One evening, after Leah had fallen asleep, Eduard found Anna sitting in the garden, her hair glowing softly under the lights. She looked peaceful, lost in thought. He approached quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea. She smiled when she saw him. "You didn't have to," she said softly, taking the cup. "I wanted to," he replied. There was a pause. Then he added, "Anna, you've done more for my daughter than anyone ever has. I don't even know how to thank you." She looked down, embarrassed. "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Gray. Leah is special. She just needed someone to understand her." He sat beside her, looking up at the stars. "You make it sound so simple. I've spent years trying to reach her. And yet, somehow you did it in months." Anna smiled, her voice tender. "Because love doesn't always come through words, Eduard. Sometimes it's just about being there, quietly." There was a long silence, the kind that doesn't need to be broken. The night was cool, the air filled with the sound of crickets and distant laughter from a neighbor's yard. Eduard looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment he realized how much he admired her strength, her kindness, her heart. He opened his mouth to speak, but just then, Leah appeared in the doorway, half asleep, clutching her teddy bear. "Daddy," she mumbled. "Anna." Anna stood up immediately and took Leah into her arms, holding her close. Eduard watched them, the two people who had somehow become his entire world, and he felt something stir deep inside him. Later that night, after putting Leah to bed, Eduard stood by her room's doorway and watched Anna tuck her in with such care, whispering soft words that made Leah smile even in her sleep. When Anna turned around, she found him there, eyes full of something she couldn't quite name. He spoke quietly, almost like a confession. "You've changed everything." Anna blushed. "I just did what felt right." Eduard shook his head slightly. "No, you did more than that. You reminded me what it feels like to live again." Anna froze for a second, unsure of what to say. Her heart raced. There was an intensity in his gaze, but not one of desire, rather one of deep emotion, of gratitude wrapped in admiration. She smiled nervously and walked past him. "Good night, Mr. Gray." But as she passed, Eduard reached out and gently touched her hand. "Good night, Anna," he said, his voice soft but full of meaning. From that night on, something changed between them. It wasn't spoken, but it was there. In every glance, every smile, every lingering moment, Anna began to realize she was falling for him, for the man behind the suit, the man who stayed up late reading bedtime stories to his daughter, the man who carried a quiet sadness but also a strength she had never seen before. Eduard, too, was changing. He smiled more. He took breaks from work just to be home. He cooked dinner sometimes, terribly, but Anna would laugh and help him fix it. And Leah was happier than ever. She felt love everywhere around her, even if she didn't yet understand what was happening. One Sunday morning, while they were having breakfast together, Leah looked up at them and said, "Daddy, Anna should stay forever." The words caught them both off guard. Anna blushed, looking down, and Eduard laughed softly, his heart melting at his daughter's innocence. "Do you think so, sweetheart?" he asked gently. Leah nodded with a big grin. "Yes, she makes you smile again." Anna's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide, and Eduard reached out, taking her hand over the table. Their eyes met, And in that simple, silent moment, something unspoken passed between them. That afternoon, Eduard took Leah to her favorite park, and Anna went with them. They spent the day laughing, chasing bubbles, feeding ducks, and taking photos. It was the kind of day that felt timeless, the kind that makes you forget everything else. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with gold and pink, Eduard took a deep breath and looked at Anna. You know, I used to think happiness was about success, about building something big, achieving goals, winning. Anna turned to him, curious. And now, he smiled softly. Now I think happiness is just this, being with the people who make you forget the rest of the world exists. Anna's heart fluttered. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. When they got home that night, Leah fell asleep instantly, exhausted from all the excitement. Eduard and Anna stood by the door, both quiet for a long moment. Finally, Eduard spoke. Anna, there's something I need to tell you. Her eyes lifted to his, nervous and expectant. But before he could continue, a sudden sound broke the silence. Leah's small voice from the hallway. Daddy, don't forget to say goodnight to Anna. They both laughed softly, the tension dissolving in an instant. Eduard leaned down, kissed Leah's forehead, then turned back to Anna. Good night, Anna. Good night, Eduard, she replied gently, her voice almost a whisper. As she walked away, Eduard stood there for a moment longer, feeling something new blooming inside him. Something pure, undeniable, and unstoppable. He knew, deep down, that his life would never be the same again. And somewhere inside that quiet house, as the night settled in, a little girl smiled in her sleep, because even if she couldn't explain it, she knew love was finally finding its way home. Days turned into weeks, and weeks quietly folded into months. What once felt like a temporary arrangement had now become something much deeper, something unspoken, yet undeniable. The house that had once echoed with silence was now full of life, laughter, and the gentle hum of togetherness. Eduard had changed. Everyone around him noticed it, his colleagues, his friends, even his business partners. He was still the sharp, confident CEO who made decisive choices and carried himself with strength. But now, there was softness in his eyes, a calmness in his voice. He smiled more, he listened more, and whenever someone asked him what had changed, he only said, I finally found balance. But balance, as he knew, had a name, Anna. And while he tried to deny it at first, there was no longer any point in pretending. He was in love. One evening, Eduard was sitting in his office, reading Leah's latest drawing. She had drawn 3 stick figures, herself, her daddy, and Anna, all holding hands, surrounded by a giant heart. At the top of the paper, in her clumsy handwriting, were the words, my family. He stared at it for a long time, feeling his heart tighten. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that comes when the truth can no longer be ignored. He stood up, went to the window, and looked out at the sunset painting the city in shades of gold. His reflection in the glass looked back at him, a man who had everything money could buy, but who had only now found something it never could, meaning. That night, he made a decision. Anna was in the garden, watering the plants as she often did in the evenings. The air was cool, and Leah was inside, humming to herself as she played with her dolls. Anna's hair moved with the wind, the soft light from the house wrapping her in a golden glow. She didn't hear Eduard at first. He just stood there, watching her, taking in the moment. Anna, he said softly. She turned, smiling, unaware of what he was about to say. Mr. Gray. Oh, I mean Eduard. She still stumbled over his name sometimes, though he told her a dozen times to stop being formal. He smiled faintly and took a step closer. I wanted to talk to you. She set the watering can down and nodded, curious. Of course. Eduard took a deep breath. When you first came here, I didn't know how much I needed you, not just for Leah, but for me. You brought light into this house, into both our lives, and I can't imagine a day without you now. Anna froze, her heart pounding. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Eduard continued, his voice trembling slightly. I've spent so much time chasing success, thinking that happiness was about what I built outside these walls. But it was right here all along, in the laughter of my daughter, and in the heart of the woman who made us whole again. Tears began to fill Anna's eyes. "Eduard," she whispered. He stepped closer, his gaze steady, full of emotion. "I don't want you to ever feel like just an employee here, Anna. I want you to feel like what you already are, family." Her breath caught. "Are you saying?" Eduard nodded, his voice soft but clear. "I'm saying that I love you, and I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know it." The world seemed to stand still for a moment. The sound of the wind, the soft rustling of leaves, the faint music coming from the house. Everything faded. Anna felt her heart pounding against her chest, every memory of their time together flashing before her eyes. The laughter, the late-night talks, the small gestures, the kindness in his eyes every time he looked at her. And then she smiled, a tear rolling down her cheek as she whispered, "You took the words right out of my heart." Eduard let out a shaky laugh, relief washing over him. "So that means?" She stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "That means I love you too, Eduard." At that moment, something beautiful broke open between them. Not fireworks, not grand gestures, just quiet, honest love. The kind that grows slowly, roots deep, and heals everything it touches. Leah appeared at the doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Daddy? Anna?" They turned to her, smiling. Eduard held out his hand to her. "Come here, sweetheart." Leah ran over, still half asleep, and hugged Anna tightly. "Did I tell you my wish came true?" she murmured, her little voice soft and drowsy. Anna smiled, kneeling down. "Your wish?" Leah nodded. "I wished that you would never go away." Anna's eyes filled with tears again as she looked up at Eduard. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. Eduard wrapped his arms around them both, his daughter and the woman who had changed their world, and for the first time in a very long time, everything felt exactly as it should. Months later, on a bright Saturday morning, their home was filled with laughter once again. But this time, it wasn't a corporate celebration or a formal gathering. It was a small, beautiful wedding in the garden. Only close friends and family attended. Leah was the flower girl, proudly scattering petals down the aisle, her face beaming with joy. As Anna walked toward Eduard, wearing a simple white dress and holding Leah's hand, everyone could see it. The glow of happiness that no money could ever buy. When they exchanged vows, Eduard said, "You didn't just heal my daughter's heart, Anna. You healed mine." And Anna, with tears in her eyes, replied, "You gave me something I never thought I'd find. A home where love lives quietly, but forever." The guests clapped softly as they kissed under the morning light, and Leah shouted joyfully, "My family!" Eduard lifted her up, laughing through tears. "Yes, sweetheart, our family." And as the sunlight bathed them all in gold, it felt as though life itself had paused to honor that moment. A reminder that sometimes love doesn't arrive with thunder or lightning, but softly, like the morning light through an open window, changing everything it touches. Because love, real love, isn't found in grand gestures or perfect timing. It's found in the unexpected. In a quiet house, a child's laughter, and the gentle heart of someone who walks into your life when you least expect it and stays. And so, Eduard, Anna, and little Leah began their new chapter. Not one built on wealth or power, but on the kind of love that endures, that heals, and that finally makes life feel whole.